Shalom, and welcome to V'ahavta Yisrael, a Hebrew phrase which means you shall love Israel. We hope you'll stay with us for the next 30 minutes as our teacher, Dr. Baruch, shares his expository teaching from the Bible. Dr. Baruch is the senior lecturer at the Zera Avraham Institute based in Israel. Although all courses are taught in Hebrew at the Institute, Dr. Baruch is pleased to share this weekly address in English. To find out more about our work in Israel, please visit us on the web at LoveIsrael.org. That's one word, LoveIsrael.org. Now, here's Baruch with today's lesson.
Well, tonight, you're going to think that you've entered into law school rather than a Bible study. And the reason for that is simple. We have been learning and we're going to continue to learn from this passage known in Hebrew as Mishpatim, which means judgments. And we have seen over the last few weeks that God gives situations in His Torah, in the law, and based upon the situations, there is instructions given to the community. And the purpose for this, as we have stated over and over, is that justice might be mediated out. We want our society, we want our homes, our families, our possessions to be under justice. And God has told believers, His people, His covenant congregation, to execute justice, to get involved to make sure justice is indeed maintained. So what are the rulings that we're going to look at this evening? Well, we're going to pick up with the same verse that we concluded with last week. Why is that? Well, it's the first verse of chapter 22 in the English. But in the Hebrew, it is actually the last verse of chapter 21. But it is in regard to the same subject material that we're going to be learning tonight for the first half of our study. So I'm going to go back and reread it and share with you more or less what I shared with you last time. Tonight we're going to be looking for the first few examples at thievery. Something is stolen and how to respond to that in order that justice is maintained. Look, if you would, to our first verse. If you're following, and most of you are, in English, chapter 22, verse 1. If you're following in the Hebrew, or you're looking at the English, but from a Jewish translation, meaning that it's from the position of Rabbinical Judaism, that book, how it's been translated, it will be the last verse in chapter 21. For simplicity, tonight we're going to assume that we're all in chapter 22, verse 1. For if a man steals an ox or a sheep, he steals it, but he slaughters it or he sells it. What's the point? It's no longer in his possession. He cannot return it. Now this is important because the Torah is teaching us something. Restitution must be, if at all possible, that exact thing that was stolen. If you cannot return the exact thing, you're going to pay a premium. Why do we know this? Well, notice what we talked about last week. If he slaughtered it or sold it, it's not in his possession. Then it says 5, and the word here is bakar, it's a word for livestock or cattle. Here we're talking about an ox, so he must return 5-fold, 5 cows or 5 bulls. But if it is a sheep, notice what it says. For the sheep, he must return 4-fold. So the ox is rare. It is of greater value. And therefore, there's going to be a greater punishment than something of lesser value. That's what the Torah is teaching us. Look now to the next verse, verse 2. This is going to deal with a theft in progress. We read, if One is breaking in, and the thief is found. So while he's breaking in, and the word here kind of means like tunneling in or doing so in a very either way that is covert, you don't see it, or in the middle of the night, but he's breaking in. He's using some type of effort to break in, meaning he wasn't there to begin with. So it's not as though that this one is a guest in your home and he decides to steal something. You know he's there, and you would not want to use lethal force. If you've invited someone in, you would not expect this one to be a threat to you. But if someone breaks in, and as he is breaking in, you come and you don't know why he's there, and you use lethal force to defend yourself, what does the Torah say? It says, En lo damim. He has not shed innocent blood. So the situation is, even though it's a theft in progress, you don't know why that person's come. You are defending your life, perhaps. Therefore, in doing so, using lethal force, this person dies. You have not shed innocent blood. But look at the next verse, verse 3. Im zarcha hashemesh alav. If the sun is shined upon him. Now, this means it's an idiom. If it's daylight, the sun shining, or you see clearly what he's doing. You know that he's simply wanting to steal something. Then you are not supposed to use lethal force in order to defend property. Now, realize something. In many countries, and if you're from America, there are states which say their law is you can kill someone who's taking your property. But the Torah does not allow that. So if you're a believer, and even if you're in a country or in a state that allows you to kill that person who's taking your property, you as a believer, you as someone who is under the truth of this book, you cannot use lethal force to kill someone in order to preserve your property. That's what the scripture is saying. So if it's daylight, if the sun is shining upon this one, what happens? Now this means that the situation is also clear, it's known. And in this case, it says, he shall surely pay him, meaning this one has to restore what he's taken. But if he cannot restore, what happens? He is sold, that is, the thief is sold into being a bondservant because of his thievery. And we learn in a previous study in this same section that we're not talking about a slavery like what the world does. In taking a human being and selling him into slavery where he can be mistreated and killed and whatever. This is not what we're speaking about. A bondservant, remember, only needs to serve up to maximum 6 years. And even if those 6 years are not sufficient to pay off his debt, he goes free. If it's less time, maybe only a few months he has to serve, then he goes free at the end of this. But if he cannot make restitution, he becomes a bondservant. That's what we're looking at the end of verse 3. Now verse 4. But if it's found in his hand what he has stolen, whether it be an ox or a donkey or a sheep, and what's found in his hand, whether it's one of those animals and it's alive, it says he pays twice. So it's not enough that he just makes restitution. If that sheep is worth $50, he gives back that $50 sheep and he adds $50 to it. If we learn that sheep is not alive, it's not in his possession, then he has to do what we learn in verse 1. If it's an ox, fivefold. If it's a sheep, fourfold. But if it's in his possession, he restores it, he gives it back, he makes restitution, plus he doubles it. So he has to give that $50 with that sheep. Then notice something else. Verse 5. Here we're not talking about any longer thievery, but we're speaking about negligence. Here's the situation. If a man consumes the field or the vineyard, now how did he do that? He brought damages upon the field or the vineyard of another. How did he do it? He sent forth his beasts. So he let go his animal to graze, and it didn't graze in his property, in his field, but it went into the field of another or the vineyard of another and did damage. It was consuming its fruit or its grain, its produce. It says here, therefore the best of his field or the best of his vineyard he must pay. Now, because this is not a theft, we're not talking about one stealing, but he was careless. In that case, he has to restore. He makes restitution, but here's where it's saying, from the best of his field. Now, the issue is this. Let's say that I borrow a car, and now that car is destroyed because of negligence on my part. I can't give my car to replace it if it's of lesser value. Someone had a beautiful new car, a very expensive model. And now I'm just going to give Tim my car and say, here's my car, which is many years older and a cheaper model and such. No, I have to give the best, the highest value. So if I have, through negligence, inflicted damages upon someone else, it's not that I just restore the same type, but it's got to be the very best of it. So this is what the Torah is teaching us, that someone should not be injured by my negligence. I need to restore the very best of that type, the very best of my ability. Verse 6. Here's another example of negligence. If fire goes forth and finds the thorns, so it goes out and it does damage. Notice thorns would be not of any significance, but we still need to deal with the smallest of damages. Or it consumes the grain or the stock, meaning the corn, or the field, a portion of it, or its entirety. So fire goes out under my responsibility. I'm careless. I set a fire and it causes damages to someone else. It says here that I shall certainly pay the one who is burned, meaning his field was burned up. I should pay him because I'm the one who has burned it up. So we have a purpose here of teaching negligence. There must be a restitution, and I need to pay, like we learned, the proper amount. Not just saying, well, the value of this painting, a painting is worth $100. This may be a master's piece. So it needs to be a proper restitution. Look now to verse 6. 6, we're still dealing with potential negligence, but here, it's not that something was stolen by me or I was negligent and I caused damages. Here's a different situation entirely. Look at verse 7. We read here, for a man gives to his neighbor money or vessels, some type of possession to keep. So someone gives me money to keep or some other possession. And what happens? It is stolen from the house of the man. In this case, someone breaks in and takes what I've been entrusted with. It takes it. Read on. And if it was found, the thief. So someone gives me $100. I put it away in my home. My home is broken into, and it's taken. But in this situation, the thief is found. Therefore, he makes restitution, not me. Now, what if the thief is not found? If the thief is not found, it says that the owner of the house, that would be me, would be brought before, notice this word, Ha-Elohim. The word Elohim, God. But this is another example. We talked about a previous example a few weeks ago. But this is the word in this context, not God. It's the word Elohim, meaning God. But in this context, it's judges. So the owner of the house that was broken into, he comes, he's brought before the judges, and what happens? If he did not stretch forth his hand on the property of his neighbor, it wasn't me who took it. I'm innocent. I didn't do it. Therefore, what happens? Well, we are told in this case that I'm innocent. That's the implication. If it was found that I didn't take it, I'm not responsible. What's the implication? Well, it should be viewed as no other than that property or that money was in the original person's house. And if it was broken into, he would lose it. If it was stolen, he would lose it just because he entrusted it to me. If it was taken from me and I give an oath or make testimony before the judges, I didn't do it, then I don't have to make any restitution. Verse 8 or verse 9 in the English. It's going to be given a summary statement. Here we read, concerning every matter of a crime. The word is pesha. Pesha is a criminal action. It can also be the word transgression. So perhaps in your Bible it says this, but the idea here is not a transgression or a sin from a religious point of view solely, but a criminal act. So concerning every criminal matter, whether it be an ox or a donkey or a sheep or a garment or anything that's lost, who he will say, this is it. Now, this is an idiom saying someone comes forth before the judges and he says, this is the situation. He says, this is what's happened. It says, whoever, if they testify such, both of them say, I gave him this and he lost it. It was stolen, whatever, he doesn't have it. Then the one gives an explanation, they both testify, and whomever the courts condemn, he needs to pay twice to his neighbor. So in this situation, we have multiple possibilities. Something disappears. I was given $50, please hold this $50. I say to the court, it's gone. I didn't take it. I didn't stretch forth my hand on it. But something else happened. This other one testifies. So the two makes testimony. And whomever the courts condemn, whether it's me, they say, I don't believe that your testimony is believable, reliable. Or there's another person they bring in. And he is accused of it, or he is thought to do it. He gives testimony. Whatever the courts decide as the guilty one, he needs to pay double, make restitution, and as we learn, add to it the same value, so he pays double. Now, verse 10. For if a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any animal, and the message here is a domestic animal, that he should keep it. Now here we're not talking about a crime taking place, that it disappears or that it is stolen. Notice the situation. And the Torah here is going through different examples to teach us about different situations and how we should judge them. So in this case, verse 10, if a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any type of domesticated animal, cattle, to keep, and it dies, or nishbar. Nishbar is usually broken, but in this context, it's injured. So someone gives me an animal and says, will you keep it? And I say, yes, I will. But in the course of me keeping this animal, it dies. Well, it could have died in the other one's possession. Or it's injured. It could have been injured in his possession. And notice the next word. The next word is nishba. Nishba comes from the word to be taken captive. Now, some will say driven away. But it's literally, the more exact understanding is, sometimes an army comes and there is that army who plunders. It takes spoils, booty. So in this case, what it's saying is, if this is the situation, an army came, if he would have came to your house, they would have taken it captive. If it was injured, it could have been injured while you were watching it, or it could have died when you were watching it. So in these three examples, and there's no one to watch, no one knows, in these three examples, what happens? Look at verse 11. The one, in this case it would be me, I would take the oath of the Lord that should be between both of them, so they testify, and if it's proven or seen that I did not stretch forth my hand on the possessions of the enemy, if this is what's been determined, it says the owner of that animal should receive it, and he should not be paid. Why? As I said, the animal could have died in his own possession, or been injured in his own possession, or been taken captive by an army, plundered in his possession. So just because it was at my place, I shouldn't be made to make restitution, and that's what the Torah is saying. But notice verse 11, or verse 12 in the English. If it is stolen from him, he should pay his owner. Now, what it means is this. If the one who has stolen it, he should pay his owner. Now, there's a couple different ways that it's understood. In this case, if it's stolen, maybe I was negligent. I left it out in a way because it wasn't mine, so I make a normal restitution. Not twice, but do it. Or if it's the one who they found stolen, then he makes restitution. This is in regard to not other things, but animals that are watched, given, entrusted to someone else. Verse 13, but a different situation. Here we're going to have a wild animal comes and tears up this one that was entrusted. So he brings the testimony of the action. Now, the word here is this. He would bring the carcass to show that it wasn't slaughtered. It wasn't partly consumed by me, but it was clear that a wild animal devoured it, and a wild animal usually doesn't take everything, and there's some type of evidence that it was devoured by an animal. In this case, notice what it says, he does not pay. Okay, in that situation, he does not pay. Verse 13 or 14 in the English. A different example. For a man asks from his neighbor. This is a case where it's harvest time. And I am supposed to be, I ask my neighbor, can I borrow your ox in order to plow the field, to harvest, whatever it may be? And in the course of the time that that animal is with me, it says, he is injured or dies. Now, what do we do in this circumstance? I borrowed him. I didn't pay for it. I didn't rent him. I borrowed him. And what happens? He dies. It says here, if the owner is not with him, he must pay. He must make restitution. So in this situation, I borrow one. I'm working with him, but he dies or is injured. Because I borrowed him, I'm responsible for it. Maybe I worked him too hard. Maybe I was careless and he was injured. So in this case, I have to make restitution. But it says here in verse 15, if the owner is with him. So in this case, I said, I want to borrow your ox to do something on my field, something that I need done. And the man says, I'll come and help you. I'll be there. He's supervising. He's watching what's done. So if I'm doing something negligent, he needs to stop it. So if it's under his supervision and the animal dies or is injured, there's no restitution that is made because he should have watched out if I was doing something wrong. He could have interceded. The last case, look at the end of verse 15, im sachir. Now, if I rented this animal, I didn't borrow it as a favor, but I paid him for the use of this animal. In this case, if something happens, what's the outcome? Well, in this case, I paid, and if he's injured or dies, it says, hu ba b'scharo. He comes with what? Well, I paid him, and that's what he gets. If it's a business deal, the fact that I paid money. Now, if it's loss, we don't know. This is a different situation. But if he is injured or dies, then there's no restitution that has to be made in this situation. Why is that? Well, because it's a business deal. And he needs to know, as lending this out, that things happen. Things stop working. Things can get, with normal wear and tear, things can get broken. So if it's a business situation and this happens, then it's not. It's the same way as renting a car. If I borrow a car and something happens, it's injured, I should probably repair it. Because maybe I'm liable. Maybe I'm negligent. It happened. But if I rent a car from Hertz or Avis and something goes wrong, well, they need to take care of it. It's their responsibility. If it's not an accident, a car accident that I'm responsible for. But if the car just stops working, or there's something that happens in the course of it, the timing belt breaks and causes damage to the engine, something like that, I'm not responsible, because the owner of that, he's in a business relationship. So here's a few examples of what we see from the Torah in order to bring justice into a situation. Well, I'll stop with that until next week when we continue on in this same 22nd chapter of the book of Exodus. Shalom from Israel.
Well, we hope you will benefit from today's message and share it with others. Please plan to join us each week at this time and on this channel for our broadcast of LoveIsrael.org. Again, to find out more about us, please visit our website, LoveIsrael.org. There you will find articles and numerous other lectures by Baruch. These teachings are in video form. You may download them or watch them in streaming video. Until next week, may the Lord bless you in our Messiah Yeshua, that is, Jesus, as you walk with Him. Shalom from Israel.